So I'm making this video about Venus in Sagittarius, which we're about to experience here by transit, November 2019. And this Venus in Sagittarius is going to be closely joined Jupiter and Saturn, and also the south node Ketu over the next several weeks. So this is going to be a quite a transit. As I'm recording this here on November 20th, 2019, we see that that Venus is here right at the edge of Sagittarius. It's pretty close to Jupiter in the sky as well. If you look up in the sky, you'll see they're very close, especially after sunset. Very beautiful in the western sky after this, the eastern sky after the sun goes down. But actually, it's the western sky. Sorry, the sun goes down in the west. Get my head straight. So look after sunset, look up in the sky, and you'll see Venus and Jupiter are pretty close to each other. And this is very much, shown. And also Saturn is visible as well. You'll see those three lighting up the sky after sunset. I've had some beautiful sunsets here. I can see the sunset pretty much every night from my balcony, so I'm pretty lucky here in San Diego to get such a thing. But so Venus, if we go forward even one day, so by this time tomorrow, November 21st, Venus is then in Sagittarius, very close to Jupiter. You can see by the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, it's exact there, 25th. So Venus and Jupiter are going to be very close to each other in the sky. When Venus and Jupiter are joined, it'll be good exercise for you to also see the conjunction of what planets look like when they're, when there's a conjunction. They look kind of skewed in the sky. It's a very good exercise for you to see because the ecliptic goes this way. So oftentimes when there's a conjunction, but we measure it this way. So often you'll see a conjunction and they're actually kind of like this because that's the way the ecliptic longitude works. So look up in the sky and notice, especially after sunset, what the conjunctions look like. And you'll also see, the planets when they get close even to what's called a planetary war, when they get within 1 degree of each other, they're said to be in a planetary war. There are a couple of different rules for planetary war. One of the standard rules is that Venus always wins the planetary war because it has a higher magnitude. There's a couple things that really determine the war. I'm not going to get into it too much here, but brightness is definitely one of them because their rays kind of join. This is the principle behind the planetary war. And so, but regardless of which one wins, a planetary war, that only happens for like a day or two, especially with Venus. It'll only happen for one day because the next day Venus is passed. So less important than the war and who wins it that day is the transit itself, because Venus in Sagittarius is not really in the sign of a friend. Jupiter and Venus are mutual enemies on a functional level. Well, actually, Jupiter is said to be neutral toward Venus, and this transit is actually has Venus in a neutral dignity by default because Jupiter rules Venus's exaltation Rashi. But still, there's an uncomfortable relationship with Venus as it goes through Sagittarius because of the stress between Venus and Jupiter. They are both gurus, but they teach different things. You might hear astrologers make statements like, well, Venus and Jupiter don't really get along, but then not really say why. I like to explain why. So yeah, they're both gurus. And instead of saying, well, they don't like each other or something, that's not really the best way to say it. They just teach different things. They're different parts of you. And again, we talk about the planets like they're these rocks moving around and like it's some abstract thing. it definitely works on the abstract level, but they're actually facets of your consciousness. Venus is the part of you that's trying to enjoy life and through like relationship and food and experiences. And Jupiter is the part of you that is trying to find higher meaning and purpose in things beyond this life, beyond this world. So in many ways, the stress between Venus and Jupiter is that stress between wanting to enjoy life and perhaps even indulge and wanting to leave the world and find higher meaning and purpose in things like gurus and those kinds of situations. And that's what we have. I'm just going to look here. I do see a couple very strange, these support emails. I'll look and I'll look this over. Okay. I have a help desk and I check my help desk all the time. It's samjeppy.com/help. And we'll deal with it. Okay. So besides that, I'm not doing tech support on live calls. Okay. So this is like a Mercury retrograde, Venus changing signs kind of thing as well. If there's been some issues, sorry about that, but email me and that's all. But I'm not going to talk about that anymore on this, on this video. So as I've said, that this transit of Venus through Sagittarius is going to bring these different, parts of our nature. So Venus mainly is about relationship and connecting and honoring each other and being respectful, respectable, things like that. And in the highest sense. And in the more mundane sense, though, it's about pleasure, happiness, relationship, trying to get along with each other. And then, but again, Sagittarius is very philosophical. It can be quite mystical, religious, about higher wisdom, higher purpose, things that are beyond this earth. So this is kind of the struggle. And many times this brings Venus in this realm, especially of having unrealistic expectations for like partners, a lot of sort of projections of other people where we have a lot of disappointments. Jupiter tries to connect us with something that's ultimate and almighty. Very few things are that way. Things like God, guru, those are the great things that Jupiter's looking for. Venus is looking at people usually and worldly experiences, and those things don't resonate on that higher level. So this is often the struggle between Venus and Jupiter. So again, Venus and Jupiter are going to be literally joined, but they're going to be joined in Sagittarius, which is Jupiter's sign. So this means that Venus is going to be getting the worst of it in that sense. So again, there could be a lot of like relationship disappointments, those kinds of things. And not being, but instead of just looking at it that way, it's trying to spiritualize your partnerships, relationships, trying to take them to something beyond. Same way with your worldly experiences, like, your sensual experiences and whatnot. It's trying to take it to something higher, to a higher level, rather than saying, oh, I'm so disappointed in the world, so I'm disappointed in you and what you did. And so instead of you being it, maybe this one is it. Maybe that one is it. Maybe I'll find my soulmate fantasy somewhere else. I thought my soulmate fantasy was this person, but they wound up just being horrible. So maybe it's this person. And we just keep projecting the same fantasy on different people instead of looking at the one who's projecting the fantasy. Maybe everybody's not wrong. Maybe everyone else isn't the problem. Maybe it's the projection that's the problem, and looking for other people to be God is the problem, Instead, you need to look at God to be God and people to be people. And look at yourself. Once the soulmate fantasy person disappoints you, or whatever it is, how do you act then? Are you still Venus? Are you Venus person? Are you being respectful? Are you being kind? Are you being gracious? Not usually. That's not usually what happens, right? So these are the lessons that we can learn with Venus interacting with and Jupiter energy. So that's going to be happening. That's going to be happening very soon as Venus gets closer to Jupiter in the sky. And so we can see that here in the next few days, again, even by, even the next few days, Venus and Jupiter will be exact. But again, Venus will be there for the entire transit. Venus will be in Jupiter's sign. So there's going to be that quality. But certainly in the next few days, we could feel a lot of this sort of romance, disappointment, projection cycle happening. And then you can see Venus moves through. And then in early December, like late November, early December, you could see Venus is very close to Ketu. So Venus Ketu, again, this is going to, again, it's Ketu and Sagittarius, going to really extract a lot of that essence. Again, what this often does is make it so we're not really so interested in the mundane aspect of Venus. All of the general relationship stuff where we're looking for the other person to make us happy, you make me happy, or this worldly thing makes me happy, this worldly compromise, this worldly thing. Oh, yes. I really enjoy trying to make others happy or find some worldly happiness. That's the main way Venus, that's the main way we experience Venus. That doesn't feel as rewarding, particularly it's already in Sagittarius where we're looking for something higher. So again, hopefully we're not just projecting soulmate fantasies or, God fantasies onto the world or limited experiences. By the time Venus hits Ketu, we're going to really be getting the message. So again, this is why it's very possible to be extremely disappointed in your partners or other people or all those things that you thought was going to give you the big thing. Might be your teachers. Again, you might have great teachers, but maybe you'll start to blame the teachers because of your fantasies about what you thought the teacher was going to give you. This is also very possible. Again, the other thing to understand is Jupiter is actually there in Sagittarius, though. So there's a very high probability that the disappointment of Venus will lead actually to a lot of wisdom and a lot of insight. So instead of just being disappointed, let's say, in the teacher or the teaching or the person, the disappointment might actually lead you to something very gracious and really teach you something about yourself now. So notice this, as Venus gets very close to Ketu in late November, early December, especially disappointment, I would say maybe with teachings, teachers, and the things that you thought would inspire you could be very possible then. And then as Venus gets closer to Saturn later through the middle of December, where we'll feel the restriction and maybe the stress and pain and worry of that placement. Because again, it is a pretty heavy placement. And so we might really start to feel the pain of it then. Again, it's like, oh, well, that's bad. When will that stop? It's not necessarily bad. Pain is just to show you. Saturn is to break some childish fantasy you have. So instead we want, okay, make the pain of my childish fantasy stop so I can go back and keep living the childish fantasy again. It's usually what we think. We don't think it that consciously, but that's what it is. When we want Saturn to stop, make the Saturn stuff stop because it's too painful to bear that I have to grow up. So make it stop so I can stay immature. So again, of course it's hard. to bear all the time. But so for, definitely around the middle of December, as you can see, like December 8, 9, 10, through maybe the, 13th or 14th, we could really feel that stress. And, the way it comes out is we'll feel alone. We'll feel kind of withdrawn. We don't really feel enthusiastic about engaging because maybe we're feeling more sensitive and vulnerable and, guarded and all that, And so that's a great opportunity for things like meditation, and where that solitude is not just, a painful, making you cry or whatever. Again, great spiritual people live for those moments. They love having Saturn powerful because they can really concentrate and things are simple. So there's great benefit in this. Great benefit, especially in the form of devotion. This whole Venus transit through Sagittarius, starting on November 21st and going, literally through, through the middle of December, through like December 15th. Great devotion is possible for sure. And I say devotion because, again, it's literally where we take that joy and beauty of life, which is Venus, wanting to experience happiness and beauty, and connect it with Sagittarius energy, which is about what we're devoted to, what we believe in, and that higher purpose and meaning. Again, it's painful when we don't have a higher purpose and meaning, and when we try to wrap it up in people, individuals, which whether they be romantic partners, again, maybe teachers, again, when our teachings become when they revolve too much around a teacher, especially like one teacher and some kind of projection, and we think, oh, you'll save me, or this relationship will save me, or this teaching will save me, or you as the teacher will save me. That kind of projection. This is what we always got to be careful of with Jupiter. It's a lot of projection with Jupiter because we're trying to connect with something bigger than our momentary experience. But again, the highest quality of that is if we project that onto pure teachings, or teachers that teach pure things, then it's remarkably devotional. But be aware of how that devotion can turn into, even how there's like a romantic quality to that, right? So, like my guru, my spiritual teacher is coming. My guru Amma is coming in a couple days. She'll be in LA, and then so right in time for that Jupiter in Sagittarius. I'm sorry, the Venus and Jupiter in Sagittarius. Amma will be in Los Angeles, and then she's going to Detroit. I'm going to go see her in Detroit. When she's in Los Angeles, I'll be in Sedona teaching at an astrology conference. But so for a great guru like that, these kinds of transits are fantastic because Venus takes that desire and brings it into the spiritual realm, because that's what Jupiter is really interested in, what we believe. So again, things that fall short of that purity can leave us feeling shortchanged or short-sighted. So I hope that's a good sort of barometer of Venus going through Sagittarius next to Jupiter, Ketu, and Saturn. So I'll talk about its influence in general for each of the 12 signs. So starting with Aries, this is, Venus is your 7th house ruler primarily, which has to do with partners, going through the 9th house, which is again very devotional, very spiritual and devotional. So for Aries people, I'm talking mainly about the ascendant. For Aries people, that it will definitely really affect your teachers and your teachings, and really lead to greater inspiration, especially around things that are related to beauty and bringing a certain beautiful quality into your philosophy and teachings. So for Taurus, this is your ruling planet. So you're ruled by Venus, and this is the 8th house. So this really shows Taurus how your kind of comfort zone and pleasure cycle, so to speak, are very disrupted by these devotional moments, because you can be very, very practical. And Sagittarius is very impractical. Again, it's kind of wild devotion. So this shows how that can be quite disruptive, 8th house, and transformative. So for you, Taurus, this could be a very transformative cycle where your sort of comfort zone and preconceptions get really transformed and maybe even feel sort of chaotic a little bit. For Gemini, this is going through your 7th house, which has to do with relationships, relationship partners. And, it can be quite good for that because, the 7th house is partners and Venus is the indicator of the 7th house. So you've had all those planets, especially Saturn and Ketu, going through the 7th house, which is sort of hard for relationships and interaction and wanting to flow easily. So Venus going through that can actually really bring you back into a sort of, happy and nice connection with others and with partners for a while it goes through there. For Cancer, this is 6th house, which has to do with work, effort, perhaps some struggle and strife. Venus for you it's the 4th and 11th house ruler. So it really shows, Cancer, where you're very sort of like a homebody and you love a beautiful home and so this transit of Venus through the 6th house can really show where maybe you're engaged with some hard work around the home or some service to things that are quite domestic and even, emotional and devotional for you. Try not to get stuck in the practical concerns and worries and the tedium of it, though, Cancer. And for Leo, this is the 5th house, which has to do with creativity. Venus is also your 10th house ruler, which has to do with work. So this could be quite a creative transit for you, Leo. You're very inspired, and Venus, it's an ambitious planet for you. It shows that kind of smooth public charm that you seem to have. So going through the 5th house, it could be, very enjoyable for you. You could find some great benefit with Venus going through your 5th house and join Jupiter and Saturn. But again, it's also it's a complicated planet for you because you can also can be kind of shallow. So you need to watch that. It also rules your 3rd house of ego. So try to stay down to earth with it because it could be quite a good, quite a practical, quite a good transit for fulfilling your goals, but you might also get a little ahead of yourself and, maybe get a little pushy about things. And Virgo, this is, Venus rules your 2nd and 9th house. It's a great planet for you. It's related to money and wealth. Oh, let me bring this up. I meant to have the chart up. So it brings money and wealth. And so going through your 4th house, Virgo, this could be good for things like, again, also things maybe like real estate or, having some, doing some things out of your home to make some money or to just beautify your home. And even just have, like house guests or entertaining or, with the holidays coming or whatever, it's a nice time to really, get in there and, maybe do some entertaining. That's one of the things that comes to mind. Virgos often love to, bring people over and take care of them. And Libra, this is your ruling planet. This is the 3rd house. Now this transit, for you, because it's your ruling planet, it can definitely show some will, perhaps some, maybe not struggles, but at least, there's a lot of interest and maybe excitement, but also kind of getting a little ungrounded. And, Jupiter shows this whole kind of soulmate fantasy projection that I talked about, because you're ruled by Venus, Libra, and you're very much looking for that other person. And Sagittarius is this big, getting all fired up around that. You need to watch that, Libra, and not getting too, again, excited and then disappointed and then projecting. The problem is often the projection. There's nothing wrong with falling in love and having to be so great. People often don't like when I say these things sometimes because it sounds like I'm so cynical about love and romance or whatever, which I'm not. Actually quite a romantic at heart. Just also, know that these kinds of interactions work when we're realistic. The biggest problem with relationships often are we have all these projections and we just look at what the person is not because we come into it thinking it's going to be this big thing that saves us from ourself. Again, when we come from a place where we know ourselves, then what we offer is a sharing, and what we receive, we're grateful for. And then it's a great place to start because then you're just happy with what you get and you're happy to share anyway. So those are the things that is also the most empowered part of Venus. That's a natural quality of Venus because Venus appreciates what we get and then wants to give the appreciation back. Again, the issue with Jupiter is it makes things all wild, like, oh, this big thing, it blows things up, it conflates things too much. We get too fired up about it, and we get sort of ahead of ourselves, and then we get disappointed because we've blown something up into something that's too big. So for Libra, it could definitely turn into that. So be careful. Scorpio, this is going through your second house. This is a nice transit. Because it's, Venus is your seventh house ruler as well, your relationship planet. Second house is very much about values, also home and your immediate environment, also your friends, family. So it could be a, pretty cozy little transit there. You just had Jupiter going through your first house, so you're feeling pretty primed to be feeling good. Again, you want to watch the soulmate fantasy projections as well, Scorpio, because you're quite a romantic sign. And but in general, it's a pretty positive transit there for you. Good for meditation as well, and for devotion, because you're a very devotional sign, very devotional person. Sagittarius, this is, Venus brings a lot of desires right into your life, into your experience. It's a pretty disruptive planet for Jupiter-ruled people. But again, the benefit is always devotion. When those desires can be aligned with something higher, then it can be quite good. But again, sometimes the problem is that higher part of it, but it's certainly possible. But, Venus coming into the first house always feels pretty good. So for you, Sagittarius, certainly would feel good to be surrounded by your friends and those who you care about. That's all should be pretty clear, because the first house is just our experience, and the things I've already described about Venus going through Sagittarius, these will be just very felt experiences for you because you're Sagittarius. And with Capricorn, this is happening in your 12th house, which is about solitude, stillness, introspection, meditation, letting go. But it often arrives in the form of things like escapism, confusion, again, sort of checking out. So, it can be definitely related to things that are, healthy, but which include, like meditation and where we surrender. So spiritual surrender, stillness, solitude. But I also happen to know hardly no one does that. So for most Capricorns, that's not really what most people are doing. But it is good for that. It's good for that devotion and that meditation and stillness. But it can also be a lot of confusion and sort of fantasizing, daydreaming kind of thing. Perhaps more pleasant daydreams. Can also be frankly, like sexual daydreaming and stuff, because Venus is definitely the planet of sexuality. But it can also be quite creative, because the 12th house has that quality, and Venus is a very creative planet for you. Aquarius, this is your 11th house, which has to do with the public, large groups of people, connecting to the public and whatnot, and being of service to large groups of people. And that includes, different causes, but it can also be things like, like politics and our social circle, our social group, and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's sort of culture. So it can also be related to, again, some cause that you want to serve and that you agree with and that you want to be involved with. And Venus is a very powerful planet for you, Aquarius. It rules your 4th and 9th houses. So it also brings your teachers and teachings into full focus. And then Pisces, this is happening in your 10th house, which has to do with work, career, your status, your reputation, making an impact, making a mark in the world, all those things. So again, Venus it can certainly bring a lot of creativity, joy into those areas. But again, it can also bring a lot of desires and attachment. And those attachments can be, sort of difficult at times for Pisces people, because being ruled by Jupiter, you're more mystical, metaphysical, things like that. So just look at the, a few comments here. So Jill says, always appreciate your interpretation. The discomfort inspires us to move to another direction, as if nature tells us not here. Yeah, I mean, everything is always toward a higher goal. Samantha says, I love Saturn, just enter my Saturn Mahadash in July. Life is finally awesome. Fantasy just hurts you. Virgo rising. Right. And so, yeah, I mean, definitely Jupiter, I'm sorry, Saturn is, definitely what makes all great things happen is we focus and we commit and we stick with it even when it's difficult. Those are all the great virtues of Saturn. Doesn't feel so good necessarily, but that's just because we're also very emotional. After a while, though, we get used to that and start to really appreciate what Saturn does give, which is simplicity and this kind of appreciation, this sort of humbling, this gratitude, this sensitivity, silence, stillness. You see, we're very, again, it's like we can look at a child and see the way children are. Like, they got to be excited all the time. If they're not, they need stimulation, excitement. If they're not, they're like, give me a toy, give me something. And we think we're different. We're really not. This is the way our ego is. This is the way our mind is. We're like, come on. We're like just longing and wanting and pulling something. Again, what happens if all that stops? What do you think it feels like when all that stops? There's this thing called peace. Peace. Saturn gives peace. He tries to stop all of that. And again, because we don't like it, it's like when you tell a child, no, you can't eat ice cream for dinner. Well, the child doesn't know. Our ego is very much like that. Saturn is just there showing us the truth. We just don't want to see it usually. And it's just because we're very emotional, because there's actually really nothing wrong with what's going on, even with what Saturn does. We have attachment to some idea that things of what it looks like when it's good, there's happiness. Again, and a lot of that comes from Venus. Venus comes before Saturn in the planetary order. So we're really trying to have a Venus life. Venus is 90% of what we're all doing, if not more. Most of the time we wake up and try to find as much Venus as we can today. How much Venus can I get today? That was a good day. I was happy. I had good food, nice people, nice friends. I was comfortable. I had fun. It was great. That's all pretty much all Venus stuff. Venus and Mercury, a lot of it. Saturn comes next and goes, yes, but that's not all there is. It doesn't say you can't have any of it. It doesn't say that. It just says everything doesn't revolve around that. Saturn just says everything isn't about that. Once in a while, you're going to not be happy. Some things are worth suffering for. You have to push through certain things. Some things you need to let go of. Just because you think you want it now doesn't mean it's the best thing for you. Blah, 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 blah. It's just trying to make us grow up. So Saturn is the big one in that sense. And so, all right. So we'll just, we see DDEM is here. This is a calm yet focused period of time for us, the lucky ones. We have a teacher who helps us understand the pure form of teachings. Yes, hopefully we do. DDEM is one of my students, doing great work there. Maybe she's mentioning me, and I'm so honored. But I definitely love to study and love to teach and love to talk about this stuff. So again, for those of you, you should always understand as well, when I talk about the higher possibilities with all of these transits, because I always do, I talk about how they can be difficult, but what the highest possibility is. You know, this is why you should be studying astrology and listening and learning, so that you can know what that is. Because again, those things are always available to us. Doesn't matter how difficult it is and how stressed it is. And you'll hear astrologers now be like, oh, Venus is going to be terrible for the next Saturn, Ketu is going to be terrible. It doesn't have to be terrible. And I'm not just saying that. Again, it's not like we're saying, trying to like, and in fact, sometimes people think I'm like, oh, a cheerleader. And it actually kind of bugs me when people want to get readings because they want me to just be like a cheerleader. I'm not a cheerleader. I'm not trying to cheerlead people. Go, come on, you can do it. You know, honestly, it's not like I don't care if you don't do it. I do care. I want you to do it. But that's not my job. I don't feel my job isn't to try to cheer people on. It's to just let them know. Because I think if people know what is happening, then they don't need a cheerleader. We don't need, you know, again, we cheer on a child, like trying to make a child walk. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. We like baby people. I don't baby people. I don't want to baby people. That includes my clients or my students. I want them to understand and then get strong. Now, sometimes we need to be babied, and there's some babying that we all need to do. By the way, I'm not saying I'm doing that or that I ever do it, but what I am saying is that I really think that knowledge and wisdom is power. And so when I talk about how things could be very good in this transit as well, it's not because I'm trying to be a cheerleader. I'm not trying like, oh, just put on a happy face and blah, blah. That's a lot of new age cheerleading mumbo jumbo BS. No, it's when you understand what these things are, then you actually are riding that wave with power rather than just some kind of vapid cheerleading. And I'll contrast that to what I often heard when I started studying astrology. And the reason that I started teaching it is because I would hear astrologers say things like this. They would literally say something like let's say for this transit, well, it's going to go through there. It's going to be, in Sagittarius where it's not very friendly. Jupiter's not very good, not very friendly. So that's not good. Then Ketu is not so good. Saturn's not so good. So it's not going to be good. It's going to be bad. It's going to be, it'll be difficult during that whole transit. But just do yoga, practice your teachings, worship your guru, because all these difficult times, that's what take us closer to God. And then just kind of bypass the whole astrological equation. The astrology winds up being a series of good and bad, good and bad, good and bad, that seem to have that seem to not be related to each other. It's like, so the bad stuff is there so that you'll listen to your guru. But again, the planets are guru. They're all gurus. All of them are living teachers. They are the gurus. They are the energies of the consciousness. They're the energies of your consciousness. So when these planets interact, when these forces interact with each other, just understanding what they are and understanding like how one has an effect on the other, and rather than fall into the negative quality to aspire to the higher quality, that can always be understood. And you can see how, because we tend to just be responsive and reactive, because the planets are facets of our emotional body as well. They show our emotions popping up, trying to just take it beyond that. So rather than just feeling the tendency, which again, when the planet moves into a sign, it's going to move into that kind of emotional environment and it'll have that tendency. So rather than have, and sometimes the tendency is more supportive if it's in the sign of a friend. Sometimes it's more challenging if it's in the sign of an enemy or something that's difficult. Those are the things that I explained. But regardless, the full power and the full wisdom and the highest possibility is always there. That's the thing to explain and to understand. And so when you understand the highest possibility, then you see how, even though there might be a little struggle in there, it still can lead to the highest possibility. Like Venus just came out of Scorpio. Well, the difficulty is it's too emotional. It's kind of triggered. It can have a lot of, drama. But again, that's the tendency. But if you go to the depth of that, the depth of Scorpio and the depth of Venus, that's the higher possibility. Then we can take that quality of beauty and desire. And again, it can be very devotional in this regard because Venus is naturally devotional, but it just has to be towards something higher. So again, this isn't the same as like saying, well, it's going to be bad, so let me cheerlead you through it. It's not that. It's saying, try to understand this range. Jupiter, Venus are two gurus, but they teach different things. So be careful of the kind of deranged part of that, which is Jupiter making things too big and trying to then connect our limited desires and our limited worldview and our limited association of beauty, and then try to blow it up into some fantasy. No, instead of doing that, let that beauty become connected to God. Okay, that's the switch. It's just a little switch. And that's how astrology can be so helpful, because it's just a little switch in the energy. And then you're riding that wave with intelligence. I use that analogy of a surfer. We can sometimes really fear the big wave. When you're surfing, I've started to surf a little bit and I'm getting started. So I only surf little waves. I see a little wave and I'm like, oh, well, maybe I can handle this little wave. Big wave, I'm not ready for a big wave on a surfboard yet. I'm ready for a big wave cosmically because I've been surfing the cosmic waves for quite a while. So I see them coming and I'm not worried anymore. I know they're all power. All of it's a lot of power. You should understand this. When you get all these planets together, the more energy that concentrates around a certain area of life, the more power is there, because the planets are powers. They're forces. Even if it's all the difficult ones. We got Saturn, Ketu there, two malefics. That's difficult. But look at how much power that brings and how much insight and wisdom is there. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's a big wave. So if you can ride that big wave, you go really far. The bigger the wave, the more, the further it takes you. But it's a little more dangerous. But we don't have a choice in life. The waves come. We have to ride them. They're the cosmic waves. But for some of you, it might be a kind of dead spot in your chart. For other people, like if you're a Sagittarius or if you have a couple planets there, it could be quite a lot. But for all of us, this is pretty concentrated. This is a lot of energy in one area. I'm Gemini, so I've had that Saturn and Saturn K2, now Saturn K2 Jupiter. It's been my 7th house, which is the big area of life. Now Venus coming in again. So for all of us, that's a big concentrated area of life. That's why I'm talking about it as well, and trying to break down each of the different components. And rather than have it be a kind of, well, it's going to be hard, so just pray to God and hope you get through it and cheerlead, it's like you want to understand each of these things with a lot of intelligence and understand how these energies lead to higher consciousness. And again, I'll just say, by the way, just before I forget, I meant to say this at the beginning, but I get going, I forget to mention it, but I'm opening my certification course for the next few days until the beginning of December. So you're encouraged to to participate if you want, and join or check it out, get some classes. And I'm definitely, I have a lot of certification course students, and for example, DDEM, who was here, is one, and there's a lot of them. People study and really learn and actually, wind up doing readings and helping people and learning how to do this stuff. So that's certainly something that is available as well to all who are here. And especially with Jupiter going through Sagittarius now is really the time for this, for this higher teaching. This higher teaching is something that we're all trying to connect with now, this higher wisdom, this higher gurus, and really connecting with the purity of the teachings. And I wanted to put this link to certification course. This is a link to one of the videos. And, the reason to do this, to study is so that you learn this yourself and so that you can understand how this works for yourself, so that you can really understand these shifts that happen in your daily life, in the world. Samantha Foster says, I'm taking your certification class. Yes, awesome. I thought you were. Deedem is as well. She said, you are the teacher, Sadashiva. Thank you. Great. And Sandeep said, sir, your teaching made me fall in love with astrology. I really owe you, sir. Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. And always glad to pay it back. And Jill says, appreciate the transcendent intertwined view of astrological tendencies, a spiritual aerial view of the maze. Absolutely. Yeah, so that's what astrology gives us. It really opens us up. So we see the big wave coming and say, all right, I'm ready for it. And those, if they're still on the class, that asked about readings or something, and a while, stuff like that. I have support site. I check it all the time. People email me all the time. It works all the time. So there's no reason to ever be confused about that. It's just samjeppy.com/help. Pretty easy. So be in touch. I handle that. But anyway, everybody, wanted to make this video, and I did get up early today. I'm doing it early these days, so on the yoga schedule a little bit, and wanted to put some stuff out there. So I hope you have a good day and take care.